So Srikanth, I'm going to move into something a little more, your entrepreneurial journey in terms of, the fact that your entrepreneurial journey has been in multi waves, if I were to call it, and building even something like this, where I believe that, there was not a solution available inside, but you just get in there. So how do you really work with technology teams, with domain teams? How do you bring them together? And if you were to tell me three or four things that an entrepreneur needs to look at when solving problems not solved before, how do you advise, and what are the five things or top five things that come to your head to say, hey, look at these three or four things?
I mean, they have a saying in Tamil, Swami, that if you know yourself, then conquering the world is so simple, right? So in that sense, I think the first checkpoint that you need to have is to say, what are you good at? And you touched upon my entrepreneurial journey. So, I think the fact of building a global company did not scare me because I had worked globally in 3, 4 markets, and I'd worked for IBM across a couple of markets in Japan and in Singapore, etc. And I'd lived in the Middle East. So that was not the scary part. And being entrepreneurial also in this wave did not scare me because we had built Knowledge Dynamics from 2000 to 2006, and we had a reasonable exit at that point in time. So I knew, okay, I could build a business. But what scared me was to build a product company because I had absolutely no idea of how to build products, right? So I think that's the first acceptance that you need to have, that what are you good at, and and start doing that. So I think for me, building a product company was something that I did not necessarily know. So I had to take help. I had to, lean on a couple of mentors, advisors. Kumar Vembu being one of the, advisors who kind of stayed with me from the beginning. I said, listen, I don't know how to build products. Come and talk to my team, help me through the thinking process, etc. But obviously, if they could spare an hour a week, that in itself was great. And then I needed to do my homework around it. And to support that, what we did is we acquired a couple of small tech companies which have built products, but probably they built products for the wrong market or the wrong time and didn't have the sustaining capability. And with that, we brought in some talent of people who had already built some things. Right? So I think understanding your strengths and weaknesses and then reaching out for help is probably how I would classify the number one route. Then it starts getting a little bit easier. The second problem I had was, like you said, it was what I would call as the Serengeti migration. Everybody was spending money on digital, and here I was talking about out of home, where it was not necessarily a topic which made an engineer or a smart guy jump into the bandwagon and say, hey, I want to join Moving Walls, right? So I had that challenge. How do I attract the talent? So went through some frustrating formula. I mean, to build services company, it was very different. We had clients, we paid top dollars, we could bring them in. Sure, every business model has got problems. We built some IP around it, made it an IP friendly company, but it was still not a product company. I would say it was a services with IP. That was the first journey. So I think here I looked at it and I said, how do you solve it? And I actually realized a simple formula, which is below 30, above 50. So that was my hiring principle, right? So I went to people who were above 50s and I said, listen, especially people with children who had graduated, etc., and they had done a lot of corporate stints. So I went to them with a promise to say, hey, you can build a global company, but don't ask me for too much of money. I can't afford it. But then your children are well settled and you're also well settled. A lot of them had paid off mortgages. No, they didn't have that heavy commitment. So the above 50, I was able to attract reasonably well. And a few of them, I call them even catalysts, where it was a fractional role that they came in. But I was not paying them, anywhere close to market level. And below 30, I paid market level. So I think that's one formula that I started adopting. And even now, if you look at, the company, we may be about 130, 140 of us now. And I would say above 50s are still a significant 20% of the company would be in that zone. And 30 to 50 would be thinly spread. 20 to 30 would be like 70, 60% of the people. So I think that's one formula that I learned that worked for me, which may or may not work for everyone. Now, and we talked about creativity earlier, where I used to complain to say that it's not that the advertising industry has creativity. Every business should have creativity, right? So for me, the 30 and 50 was one creative way of finding the talent. The next problem that I had to solve, because eventually if you solve the talent problem, I think your business problems will start taking care of itself. And I don't know if I'm making sense, but to me, I had to know how to build the product, which I didn't know. And I had to solve it through a particular way. Then I need to attract the right talent. And even to 2030, I looked at it, and specifically because our first offshore center was in Malaysia, not in India. After acquisitions, we came into India. So in Malaysia, specifically our offshore center, I was having trouble finding people. And I created an internship model. And I found that it was not working. So I walked up to my HR and I said, I want to see 10 interns. And we were like head count of 20 or 15 or something. I said, your KPI is there should be 10 interns in the office until they become a nuisance and we start taking them seriously. Right? So, and internships was the way that we kind of found the 20s to 30s. So I would say, yes, there are the fundamentals of business, which having built many businesses, I still fail on, which is cash flow, which is not getting carried away with what the opportunity is. And I think those are all the fundamentals of any business that you need to put in place in terms of good planning, managing your cash flows, having good sales teams. All of that is a fundamental of any business. If I had to pick two or three things differently, I think these would be my two or three things differently that I've done.